Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Help Is Here podcast. Today I'm going to be talking about the worst thing about NoFap streaks. So I was doing these streaks from the ages of 16 to around 25 or so. And if I'm honest, they really negatively impacted my life. A lot of people might think like going on NoFap and doing a streak's a good thing, like you're stopping pornography, great. However, there's a lot of reasons why these streaks can actually work against people. So, what is the real worst thing about these streaks? Well, I think one of the biggest problems is that what we can feel is like our streaks are getting longer. Our streaks are getting longer, we start off maybe on like 7 days and then we get to like 20 days or maybe it's like 30 days. And this was what I did, during those years between like 16 and 25, my streaks were getting longer. And I started to believe like, okay, I'm making progress here. Things are getting better. Like I've managed to hit 90 days. I've got that YouTube video from like 2.5 years ago where I'm talking about hitting 90 days of NoFap. And the thing is, we can actually have this misinterpretation of that data that indicates like we're making progress with the addiction. And what I want to get across is that there's not necessarily a correlation between your streaks getting longer and your progress with addiction recovery. So what I believe happened, and I don't think I really saw this at the time, but what I believe happened is like the quality of my life was actually getting worse and worse. Like just small things, like I kind of became less sociable to some extent. My flat was just getting in a worse and worse condition. I stopped looking after things like my own furniture. I stopped looking after myself really, like my quality of life. And I prioritized pleasure over real peace of mind and confidence and clarity. So for me, what happened is I really replaced porn with other things like social media and gambling for a while as well. I actually had a gambling addiction and lost a lot of money gambling once upon a time. And there were other behaviours in my life, overeating, like binge eating food, spending copious hours on Netflix. So the quality of my life was actually going downhill for a lot of the time during those NoFap years. And, I was spending less time with my mates and my relationships were, a bit up and down and, it was just kind of, things were getting worse basically overall. Career trajectory as well for years and years until I met Mary Portis and learned this method and like learned how to stop this behaviour for good. My career trajectory was pretty slow and, I had a lack of self-respect, I think. I think because I kept going on these streaks, and we'll talk about the self-trust in a moment, but because I kept going on the streaks and then relapsing, I think that led to a lack of self-trust. Like I remember this job I had after the gambling sort of addiction kind of ended because I lost like so much money. I was just like, right, I'm never going to do that again. Even though I then just like transferred that addiction to other behaviours like porn. But after that happened, I remember like taking a job and I was just like to the guy, like, honestly, what is the lowest amount of money like you can pay me? Like I'll be willing to just do whatever for like £1,000 a month. And here in the UK, like £1,000 a month is not a lot to live on. But that's what I said to like the owner, like the founder of this business who wanted to employ me because he'd like found my gambling sort of business online and all sorts. But the point I want to get across is like, I just had such a low amount of self-respect that I was kind of willing to do anything. And it wasn't a good place to be. So what we need to do is start off by understanding the problem with porn addiction. So the real problem that people have, because a lot of people think it's like, oh, I've not been on a long enough NoFap streak or like, oh, I keep watching porn like loads of times a day. But to me, that isn't really the main problem. It might be one of them, but the overall problem is that there's a behaviour in your life that you really want to stop. And this behaviour's got negative consequences. No matter how hard you try to stop it, you keep going back and relapsing. And we can even look at a little bit of data on this to kind of just get across how much of a problem this is for people and like how common this problem is. So we have a thing called the compulsion test. I'll leave a link below. You can get a score out of 100 to understand how much porn is impacting you. And in that compulsion test, one of the questions is, have you tried to quit porn many times, but eventually ended up watching it once again? Now, over 400 people have now answered that question. And that's a question where the score is out of 10. And the mean is 9.16. The median is 10. So 320 people have answered 10 to that question, 10 out of 10. So a lot of people, they're trying to quit porn, and no matter how hard they try to stop it, Even though it's got these negative consequences, they keep going back to it. And this can last for years and years and years. Like most guys we work with have had this problem for a minimum of 1 decade. And 10 years is a long time, right? A lot of guys, it's like 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. For me, it was probably around 10 years. And like when you zoom out of all of that and you just see like, whoa, I've actually been in a porn addiction for like 10 years. It kind of hits you hard. It's like, shit, like what the hell? Like not that much has really changed in a positive way in my life. Or like, even if things have changed positively and maybe you're in like a relationship, now you've got children, even if, you know, there's some good stuff going on, you're still in the porn addiction. And like, you kind of need someone to just tell you that and be straight with you. Like that's what I needed, is Mary Paulis to tell me like, Tom, you're still relapsing, you're still in a porn addiction. And the problem, like the worst thing about these NoFap streaks is that my trust was just like dying. Like my self-trust was just getting absolutely ruined by going on these streaks and then relapsing again. And like, it's only really when you zoom out of it all that you can see like, shit, that was actually a really bad place to be. Because you tell yourself after a relapse, you're like, I'm never going to do it again. I'm never going to do it, you know? This is it now. You know, that was the last time I'm ever going to do that thing. You go on a streak, you then relapse. And here's the thing, is that in addiction, there's these different parts in the mind. So we've got the rational part of the mind. It's probably you listening to this right now. You want to stop this behavior. You're aware of the negative consequences, and big respect to you for being aware of that. So you want to stop it. But then there's another part of you, which is like the child self, which can be quite like scared, you know. It doesn't really trust the rational self at this point in time, if, you know, you've been struggling with this behavior. And the reason the child self doesn't trust the rational part of the mind is because, you know, you've told yourself so many times, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop, I'm going to stop. And then you end up relapsing again anyway. So the child self doesn't really trust you right now, if you're struggling with this, as I say. And then you've got the addictive part of the mind. And the addictive part of the mind is actually the one that's saying like, I'm never going to do it again. Because if you think about it, the addictive part of the mind wants you way off in the future, and it wants you in deprivation thinking. And so if it can get you into future thinking, deprivation thinking, you're way more likely to relapse. I'm never going to do it again has nothing to do with your choice right here, right now. And it's your choice right here, right now, which is where you actually have the opportunity to change your neural pathways. So like everything we teach within the 5-fact script and our full education within the Beyond Compulsion Academy, it's all about getting people back into the present moment, right here, right now, to make a rational decision. I'm never going to do it again is way off in the future. Like if one of our clients said to me, you know, I'm never going to do this again, I'd call them out on it. I'd be like, okay, well, that's just future thinking. Go use your script. Like you can change that neural pathway. That's the cool thing with the 5-fact script, is it kind of helps you change your neural pathways so that instead of always being way off in the future, like relying on motivation, willpower, stuff like that, which obviously doesn't work, instead it gets us back into the present moment, which is where we need to be to actually make a rational decision, because it's the only place where we actually have a choice. So you may have had these kind of questions. I'm just going to kind of reiterate this point further. So I'm never going to do it again. How long will I feel like this? Did I already mess up? Can I ever overcome this? Oh, it's been 2 weeks since I relapsed. Any like streak thinking at all, we would say to a client, okay, well, what are you choosing to do and why? Like right now at this moment, the only question to ask yourself, instead of all these questions which don't really get you anywhere, they just kind of way off in the future or in the past, you know, streak thinking, instead just go straight into what am I choosing to do and why? Because in that moment right now, you've got a critical choice to make for yourself, and you can use a script to make that choice in a rational way and change the neural pathways. So overall, to conclude, the worst thing about NoFap streaks is they keep people stuck in a repetitive cycle of feeling like they are making progress. That was me for so many years, felt like I was making progress. And then you end up feeling terrible after every relapse. And this can result in a reliance on motivation and willpower, which is an ineffective focus on the past and future, and therefore it leads to a long-term erosion of self-trust and confidence. These are just some of the negative consequences of taking the NoFap streak approach towards overcoming porn addiction. And again, just to reiterate here, this is something I did for so many years, and that's why I feel quite passionate about it. It's because I went on these streaks, I believed I was making progress, and then the addicted part of the mind would actually pose as the rational part of the mind. And that's getting very deep into our whole method now. But it would pose as the rational part of the mind and say stuff like, I'm never going to do it again. And it would actually get you way off, like it'd get me way off into the future. It would get me away from the present moment. And like long term, it would always lead to me eventually relapsing, because then when I did have the inevitable moment of compulsive desire, which always comes once you've got addicted to your pathways, well, you're kind of screwed, because you've just told yourself, I'm never going to do it again. But now you've got this wanting and, you know, all that, you know, the power of like wanting to stop. It's not really relevant in that moment when you actually want to engage in the behaviour. So it's the constant conflict, you know, you want to do it, you also want to stop. And if you just focus on the wanting to stop, which is the I'm never going to do it again sort of side of the equation, well, it's not going to work long term, because there's still going to be a moment when you want to do it, and you're going to be screwed in that moment until you've got an effective way to deal with the addictive part of the mind and deal with that specific moment. Hopefully that makes some sense. Cheers for listening. I really, really am against like NoFap streaks. I think they can mess up people's mental health, because I know they did for me and a lot of my clients as well. If you'd like to learn how much porn is impacting you, as I say, you can take the compulsion test. You can get a score below. Cheers for listening, and we'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.